So in order to start to get meaningful information about our businesses, or when we start to think about our marketing, what we need to do is we need to start looking at gathering data and information. By gathering data and information, we can start to understand what's going on, see what's happened, and that way we can start to pick trends and issues that are coming towards us over time, or where something might happen to be going. So when we start to think about data sources, we start thinking about data types of information we could get. And really this has historically been through two major fields. So through history and through data analysis. So history, as we've normally studied, has usually concerned itself with primary and secondary sources of information. And what we normally do is we look for a primary source of information, so the direct source, not other information that's come from other sources. And why that's important is the facts speak for themselves when you actually get it from the original source of information that you've gone out to find out, as opposed to reading or getting something that's sort of second-hand or third-hand information. So we try and get as direct as we can. That's really where we're going from that. The actual analysis of data is talking about taking the raw information and that information that we've got out there and starting to highlight the useful areas that are interesting to us, to find that we can clean the data up, model it, put it into a format that's going to be useful to us and allow us to make good strategic decisions and to start thinking about, well, what conclusions can we draw from that? Okay, so the analysis is really about cleaning the information, representing the information and making sure that we've got the information that we need. Okay, so some of the things that we look about when we talk about data sources is we start to consider quantitative versus qualitative. Okay, so that's two things we start to look at, quantitative versus qualitative. We start to look at primary source of information versus secondary. And then lastly, we look at objective versus subjective. Okay, so we'll go through and have a look at what all those things mean, because it's fairly important for us to understand what's going on. And I guess the first one we'd look at would be quantitative information. Okay, so when we're looking at quantitative information, what we're looking at is things that we can convey in terms of numbers. Okay, so quantities, we're looking at what are the sales figures? How many? What are they? Okay, so we start to get really in terms of measurement. Okay, quantitative really concerns itself with, how much a customer is willing to pay, how many customers use my product, how many different things do I have, and really, like the number suggests, quantity, it's really about picking a number. It's about trying to get, to those very finite, measurable details. Okay, so you'll find that the most obvious thing to get quantitative data is to look at things like surveys. How often do you use our service? How many customers will we have? Okay, so that's what we're trying to do there, is get some actual raw numbers. Where qualitative comes in though, is qualitative starts to give us a little bit of a reason with, well, why? Okay, so if we look at, 75% of people prefer taking the train over taking the bus. Well, that's quantitative information. We know 75% pick a train over a bus, but no one's really asked the question, well, why do they prefer that? And that's where qualitative starts to come in. We go, well, is it because it's faster? Is it because it has some perception of quality? Is there some reason? Is it more comfortable? Okay, so quantitative will tell you whether people like something or not, but that doesn't really give you the why they like it or what is it about it they like, which is really what's coming out of qualitative data. Yes, you might do that. 100% of people pay their taxes, but do they enjoy doing that? Well, obviously, some do, some don't. Or is it in fact 100%? But that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get to the why and the really the how. Okay, so quantitative, how many? Qualitative, why? Okay, why do you like the color blue? 50% of people like the color blue, yes, but why do they like the color blue? And that allows us to get some extra information there. Methods used to gather qualitative information, once again, focus groups, postal questionnaires. We're starting to look at telephone interviews. A lot of the qualitative information comes from talking to a person where they can really, convey feeling and how they, how they interpret things. What do they feel about it? So it's that it's very hard to measure in quantitative terms. Okay, so the way we can usually get that is a mix of structured and unstructured questions. Okay, so ask them what, but then ask why or ask how. Okay, so we can still get our quantitative information and then ask that little bit extra. Did you enjoy this lesson? Yes, no. Well, we can then go, what did you enjoy about it as well, and start to get into that, to see what was helpful. To decide on what method we want to use, we normally think about, well, what information do we need to get? What's the, nature of intended responses? So how do we want to collect the information? And also thinking about how long we have available. Yes, no questions, very quantitative. Yes, no are very quick. To get down to the bottom of qualitative answers can actually take some time. So we need to think about what is the information we need, how do we expect people to answer. So once again, they might be easy, happy to give us some nice, quick, easy answers, whereas this might be more time consuming. So how do we want to get that? And thinking about the time and the resources we have available to check that. Okay. So to get these sorts of information, we can use sampling. Sampling will allow us to use, instead of, we don't have to ask all our customers. We might ask a small number, some qualitative and quantitative questions, which allows us to start to work out what's going on. If we start to see a bigger trend or start to see a concern coming out of that, we can always expand the study group a little bit better. Okay, so researchers don't always look at an entire population because, things like a census is too big. You're not going to look at all your customers because that's going to take a lot of time and effort, unless you're a really small business, in which case, maybe your first customers you can, but, once you get to be a large organisation, it's not really logistically possible. Okay, and the advantages of sampling is that, the cost is lower because you're only looking at a certain number of people. Data collection's pretty quick because you're only putting it out to, maybe 10% or 20% of your people there. And you can also start to think about, there's enough robustness to actually start to get some reliable, accurate quality of data. The thing about a sample when you're taking that for these is that if your sample size is too big, it becomes slow, it becomes cumbersome, expensive. If your sample size is too small, what will happen is you could find that you accidentally hit a certain number of your people that held a particular view and it's not actually reflective. So it needs to be a large enough sample size. I've seen people try and convince me they did their qualitative and quantitative survey by literally they went to the pub and spoke to 3 people at a bar. Now, while I appreciated the ingenuity behind that, I had to say that I'm not really sure that 3 guys in a pub was really a broad cross-section of potential answers. First of all, it was after 6 o'clock at night, so don't be doing that one. Make sure you're really thinking about who you want to get to, how you're going to do that, and think about the number that you require to get a reasonable sample size that you could happily base your decisions on. Okay, so think about what's going to be the most appropriate method to get that sample of information. Think about how you're going to gather that information and how you're going to identify what trends or what's consistently coming up. Think about how your market research is going to happen, but understand it. Look, it's not a crystal ball. It's not going to allow you to see the future, but it might give you some hints about what's going on. Okay, and then what you can do is from that you can develop a few ideas and start to test those ideas out there and see what's going on. All right, so qualitative and quantitative, thinking about the number, thinking about why. Sample size information, go out there and speak to your people. Then we move into the primary and secondary information streams. So your primary information is very raw information. It's gathered through your direct observations, surveys, interviews, reports. In other words, it's information that you've gone to go and get. Okay, this is information that you have sourced. You've gone with a question and you've gone and found an answer for yourself. It's very reliable, but it is expensive. Okay, because it means that it's going to be labour intensive. You're the first person to go out and find that information. On the other hand, I might have secondary information, and secondary interprets primary information. And where I might get secondary information from is things like TV. Okay, it could be radio, newspapers, it could be online reviews, it could be research articles. Okay, so the thing is, it's not information that you have sourced, it's information that someone else has put together. They didn't really have you in mind when they put it together. And there's also questions about the reliability, accuracy, and integrity. You could read a report that says Nick is the best guy in the universe, written by Nick. You'd always have to say, well, hang on, who put this information together, and is it a reliable source? I may or may not be a reliable source, you be the judge. Okay, so really when we're thinking about that primary information, what we want to do there is we want to think about 3 methods of gathering it. So the first one is to go and observe, go and see, use your eyes, go and look at what's going on. The next thing you can do is you can run experiments, okay? So you could run an experiment. If you want to see who does what in, when your customers come in, do they prefer this or this? Run the experiment. Check, okay? So this is once again you determining what answers or what information you're seeking and then setting up the investigative method to make sure that you can get that done. Okay, so the other thing you can do is you can design a survey, and it's not a general survey, it's a survey that you've designed, directly going out to answer the questions that you have. So therefore it becomes a really good source of primary information for you. You're getting it direct from the people that you're dealing with. Okay? Primary information gathering uses a couple of different techniques. You can, make it, do you prefer A or B? Okay, do you like this or do you like this? Okay, so once again, we're gathering quantitative information. Do you like this choice or this choice? Okay, we can also think about creating multiple choice, where people can choose multiple, different options. Or we might actually find that we can start to get into open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are fantastic for gathering qualitative information. So why do you like the coffee at our restaurant? Or what is it about the coffee at our restaurant that you like? And they'll either say, yeah, look, I really like the coffee because of this, or they'll say, actually, I don't like your coffee, and give you some sort of answer. Whereas if you just ask the question, do you like it, yes, no, if they answer yes, it doesn't tell you why. And if they say no, it hasn't told you how to fix it. Okay, so we can start to think about what we want to achieve from using those techniques. So creating a dichotomy, yes, no, black or white, red or blue, blue or yellow, whichever color, pick 2. We can make multiple choice where we give them a range of potential answers, or we can create open-ended. The fewer the choices, the quicker the survey, so we always have to think about timing as one of our resources. Okay, so marketers can find primary information to be of considerable value. It gives them direct access to raw data. Okay, so they can actually get that real direct opinion of exactly what people thought. It can give factual information that's been very well targeted, specifically to answer questions within your business. The main drawback is obviously that, as we say, it is expensive because you need to go and chase the information. Secondary information, I can cack it up on Google, and hey, look, there's a whole pile of answers there. But primary information, I have to go and literally go and invent the wheel and go off and actually begin gathering it. Secondary information, as we say, a little bit cheaper and a little bit easier. It hasn't been tailor-made. It's information that already exists, and that can be from a range of sources. So we look at secondary data from internal sources, okay? We have things like sales data, how many widgets did you sell every week? We can get a whole lot of information about what's actually taking place. Our sales data will tell us how many things people buy, etc. It's out there. We didn't actually go off and check anything else. We just sort of gathered the information there. It wasn't specific. Different sales data we might have are things like our received orders, shipping cost, return goods. Okay, we didn't actually go out to answer a question. What we're doing is we're taking information and then trying to sort of work out what it all means and how it relates back to our original question. We might look at financial data. That can be another thing that we look at. The cost of producing goods, cost of storing goods. We can think about transporting and marketing. Okay, so this is information that's out there that we can track together and sort of try and come up with a bit of a picture, but it wasn't ever gathered or developed from a perspective of trying to answer a particular question. This is information we've got out there. We might also look at things like, what are our transport costs or our storage costs? That can be, good information. That way we can start to work out, well, how can we deploy those assets better to save us money or do whatever we want to do with that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the key part is that it's existing information around in our organisation that we can get a hold of, and from that we can then try and work out some other question. But where it differs to primary was, once again, we didn't start with that in mind. External sources of information, look, there's heaps out there. Australian Bureau of Statistics is one that I get a lot of people to look up. The ABS is fantastic. You might also find your local councils have a lot of information out there that they've already done, looking at customer demographics, or sorry, the demographics of a community. We can understand what the income levels are, we can understand who they are. We get a lot of quantitative data. We do get some qualitative data about what they like, but once again, this information was never designed with us in mind. We're just gathering up that information and then making a decision about what that means. There might also be other associations, industry groups, etc., that will also put out information. There can be journalists, there can be bloggers, there can be, the media. You might find that you get like Sydney Morning Herald puts out stuff. You can get other newspaper, and also the various institutions around the place. So banks, it's limitless, the amount of secondary information that's out there. So you can usually find something that's of benefit to you as a marketer, that there is that massive pile of information. The advantages of it really are is that, it's, that it's out there, that there's heaps of information. It's just a Google search away. A lot of it's free, it's very quick to get a hold of. The information can sometimes be, really well put together and quite comprehensive, and it's just about limitless. The problem is that where this also becomes a problem, though, is that literally it is almost limitless. You can find so much information, but you have to filter through and say, well, how much of it's useful and where are my concerns? Because sometimes things are really poorly defined, such as family size. Well, what constitutes a family? Are we assuming it's 2 adults, 2 children, or is it, what does that even mean? Okay, so when they start thinking about measurements, okay, well, they've used a measurement. If it's not very clearly defined and specified, well, it could mean just about anything. Define for me the colour blue. Hang on, which blue? Is that a light blue or a dark blue? They don't really mention that. So the problem is sometimes the information can be a little hard to analyse and interpret. You might also find that there could be a bias. Once again, out there in that secondary market, it could actually be my opinion. I might have a lot of reasons for championing something. We don't know whether or not that, when I did that article or that review for the, for a particular good or a service, when I wrote the article about how fantastic, that particular brand was, I could have actually been being paid by that brand. Okay, so if the person doesn't disclose that, that could create some misleading information for you. The other thing you need to think about is the time scale and the currency. So when was the article written? I remember, if we go back far enough, MySpace was the greatest social media platform. I'm sure that if I look around the internet long enough, I will still find some outdated article from 2004 telling us that MySpace is the next new big thing, well before Facebook ever came out anywhere. And if that article is out of date, I might accidentally pick that up and run with it thinking that I've got current information. So the information might be really out of date. I need to think about, how long did they measure it over, when was it written, who wrote it, was there any bias from that person? And this is where secondary information really reveals where it has less reliability than primary information. That's not to say that it can't be good, it's just to say that we need to understand very clearly that there can be some issues that we need to consider. The next thing we start to look at is, was the information objective or subjective? And when we start to look at objective data, we're looking at scientific data. Very clear, measurable, dispassionate, it is the facts. This person is 180 centimetres tall. We will cut this number. Okay, so we're really, once again, looking at very clear, similar to quantitative and quantitative, we're looking at numbers and opinions once again, okay? So subjective is once again based on opinions, and we're starting to deal with, what do we think? Oh, this guy, objective says he's, 6 foot tall. Subjective says, oh yeah, he's really tall. Or, the company's doing well, or the company's doing badly, okay? So once again, when we're looking at objective information, we're looking at it needs to be scientific, or it is scientific by its nature. It's going to be measurable information, that we can say, this business has 10 employees. This business sells coffee. Okay, it says exactly what it does. On the other hand, subjective data contains opinions. it does depend on the observer. So I might say, well, it's a small business, because in my eyes, 10 people in a place is a small business. I might say the coffee there is good coffee, or the coffee is bad coffee. Once again, it's going to be a little bit subjective, okay? And it's always going to come down to my opinions on the matter, all right? So, once again, we're looking at all of our data sources put as it is, think about where we want to get that information from, think about the purpose of the information. When we're gathering data sources, we need to get a bit of a mix of quantitative and qualitative. We need to get that objective information versus subjective information. We need to think about whether the question we're posing requires primary information or whether some secondary information could do. Now, my approach is always to consider both. I know that when I go shopping for something and I'm going to buy it, I always end up in a sort of a mix, and it's a chicken and the egg. A lot of the time I'll read the reviews and I'll Google everything up, and I'll want to get on Engadget or Gizmodo or something like that, and I want to look up exactly what all the information about something is, and I'll read all the reviews around it, and then I'll go have a look. Or alternately, I'll see something I really, really like in the shop, and I think this looks really cool, this is a great idea, I think I might have a look at that. And then what I'll do is I'll go home and furiously Google it, and it's the same with books. I look at the book cover and go, that looks like a great book, and then I go home and Google the reviews, and everyone goes, yeah, the book is fantastic for the first 50 pages, and then not so good. It tells me the information I need. But what I should do is, when I get there, if I thought it was a really good idea, when I looked at it and I go home and everyone tells me on the reviews that, actually this is a problem, that gives me some pause for thought. Yes, I'm always going to consider my primary, my view, my observation, but I also need to look there and see if there's any secondary information that tells me that there could be a problem that I might not have seen, okay, or something that might, cause for concern. If I went along and I thought it looked great and all the secondary information, everyone else is happy with it, then that probably tells me I'm pretty safe. If I go along and I think it looks fantastic and everyone that I, read online says, no, it was a terrible idea, that tells me that I need to go back and have another look and see if there was something that I missed. I don't allow the other people's opinions to absolutely make mine. I still have to make my own opinion, but I'm going to base it on a range of information and a range of data sources that's going to make sure that I make the most appropriate choice and save time, save money, and save lost opportunities. Cool.